Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick telling the Commons that the government's providing an extra £3.5 billion to remove unsafe cladding from high and medium-rise buildings in England, while also imposing a levy on developers building high-rise blocks. But lots and lots of restrictions on that. And it is a situation that thousands of people have found themselves trapped in across the UK since the Grenfell Tower fire. Let's cross to our reporter Caterina Bertozzi, who is able to join us now. She is up north, Caterina, and what reaction there from those living in Manchester who are affected by this, who live in these buildings that may now have to still continue to pay, or conversely could be helped by the government?
Yeah, I'm outside one building which has a number of fire risk issues, and in fact things are so bad here that the residents have to pay many thousands of pounds for a 24-hour fire watch. It's a team they call a waking watch. They have to go around and try and spot fires early, obviously to prevent them spreading any further. Let's speak to one of these residents to get some reaction to what we've just heard from Robert Jenrick. This is Matt Hallsworth. You live in this block just behind me. First, I think if you could outline perhaps what are some of the main issues and how you might be affected or impacted or helped or not by what's just been announced.
So yeah, I live in this apartment here. We've been given bills of around £38,000 for the cost of the cladding at the sides, but we've also got like huge costs coming in that we still don't know the full extent of, around things like the fire breaks, compartmentation, insufficient kind of insulation or the wrong insulation inside. We've got balconies as well, which don't necessarily come under a definition of cladding. So we've still got lots of issues that I don't think have been covered at all today.
And that is, I suppose, one key thing, isn't it? Because as you said, we heard a lot about cladding, ACM cladding in particular. But as you've outlined, there's numerous fire safety risks with your building, which have been identified, which might not come under the government assistance.
Absolutely. And now, I mean, we're estimating that the full extent of those kind of costs, all the fire risk costs, and not just cladding, which feels like it's being used as a bit of a buzzword in a sense. It doesn't cost, if we're talking £15 billion, there's still a shortfall there, and it's not really clear how that is going to be paid for. If it's in the form of loans, we simply can't pay that. Morally, it is not right for us to be paying those kind of, loans for the mistakes of an industry that has made these mistakes.
What's it like? What sort of toll does it take? Obviously, there's the financial costs of paying for the fire watch, potential remedial works, but what sort of mental toll does it take being in this building? What's it been like?
Honestly, it feels like a prison. It feels like we're trapped. Me and my partner had planned to move on with our lives, to have a family, move away, and we've been trapped here. With lockdown, we're here 24 hours a day, trapped in what is essentially a flammable prison, stuck, potentially being on the verge of financial ruin if we're made to pay the kind of costs that are being suggested. It takes a huge toll on mine and my partner's mental health. We've both sought help for it. It's just relentless. It feels relentless, constant, being kicked when we're down by, an industry who made mistakes. None of this is our fault, and it feels like we're being punished for that.
So, £3.5 billion, a levy on the industry, it's a start, but you think not enough to cover, the £15 billion it's been estimated to actually make all the buildings safe?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, I welcome any help, any extension to the building fund to help people remediate, fix some of these problems. But ultimately, it isn't enough. It's still, the industry has cost all of this, and £2 billion clearly isn't enough to fix it. It feels morally wrong that we're being punished for the mistakes of that, and it's still, it's a start, but it feels like there's still a long way to go, and ultimately we're still in the dark over how this is going to affect us, and how, where is this money going to come from? There's still an anxiety around that as well, which is it's still pretty terrifying.
obviously, we heard from Robert Jenrick. He was talking about ACM cladding, government experts saying that that is the most dangerous type of cladding, that they've made big efforts to remove that from high-rise buildings. Do you feel like that has maybe taken priority over other fire risks that are an issue in your building?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Grenfell tragedy was something that no one wants to repeat, but it feels like when talking about it, it's almost describing as not as unsafe, less unsafe. If it's that safe, then why are we having to pay for a 24-hour watch to patrol our floors and sound an air horn if they find a fire? It's still dangerous. We're still at risk, and we're currently trapped here 24/7 in a valueless house that we're never going to be able to move from at the moment. It just feels like it's an effective soundbite, but it doesn't feel like it feels like at the tip of the iceberg they're touching on, and we need more. We need a complete kind of expansion on what they're talking about here when it comes to fire safety risks. We're talking about inside the walls. We're talking about balconies. We're talking about compartmentation of fire breaks. All these are things that affected Grenfell as well, and not just the cladding. And I think it's really important to outline that and make that clear.
Matt Hallsworth, thanks ever so much for speaking with us. Well, plenty of detail in that speech by the Communities and Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick to digest here. And people living in all sorts of apartment blocks, high-rise, medium, low-rise, will be looking at that detail, trying to now work out if they're entitled to some financial assistance and to work out really what sort of an impact it might have on them and their safety.
Katerina, thanks very much. Well, let's just remind ourselves of some of the details of that announcement from the Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick a short while ago.
Leaseholders in high-rise residential buildings will face no cost for cladding remediation works. We will make further funding available to pay for the removal and replacement of unsafe cladding for all leaseholders in high-rise residential buildings of 18 metres and above, or above 6 stories in England. We continue to take a safety-led approach, and this funding will focus on the higher-rise buildings where the independent expert advisory panel tells us, time and again, the overwhelming majority of the safety risk lies, in line with the existing Building Safety Fund and the anticipated scope of the new Building Safety Regulator that we're establishing and will shortly be legislating for. This will ensure that we end the cladding scandal in a way that is fair and generous to leaseholders. Secondly, for lower and medium-rise blocks of flats, the risks are significantly lower, and the remediation of cladding is less likely to be needed. In many cases, it will not be needed at all. But where it is, costs can still be significant for leaseholders, which is why I'm announcing today that the government will develop a long-term scheme to protect leaseholders in this situation with financial support for cladding remediation on buildings between 4 and 6 stories. Under a long-term, low-interest scheme, no leaseholder will ever pay more than £50 a month towards the removal of unsafe cladding, many far less. Taken together, this means the government is providing more than £5 billion, including a further £3.5 billion announced today, plus the significant cost of the very generous financing scheme, which will run for many years to come, to ensure all leaseholders in medium and high-rise blocks face no costs or very low costs if cladding remediation is needed.
We're going to be getting lots more reaction to that throughout the next hour here on Sky News.